Hi, please come into my lair, my library.
What a library you have.
What an appropriate place to talk about a book. Hi, I'm Katie.
Hi.
Gillian Anderson has made a career playing powerful and interesting women.
Grit, good sense and determination.
In film, TV and in the theatre.
They told me to take a street called named Desire.
She found fame aged just 24 as Dana Scully in The X-Files.
Oh, isn't it nice to be suddenly so highly regarded?
Before completely changing direction for her next role as Lady Deadlock in the BBC's Bleak House and Miss Havisham in Great Expectations. More recently, she's played real-life characters, the former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in The Crown and the journalist Emily Maitlis in Scoop, the dramatisation of that interview with Prince Andrew.
This is about honesty. Do you want to have a seat?
But it's her role as sex therapist Jean Milburn in the Netflix series Sex Education that has led her to her latest project. She's been curating a book all about women's sexual fantasies.
Did you bother to read it?
I did. I liked it.
I guess my number one fantasy is to be made to feel like I am utterly desired.
You seem fairly comfortable about sexuality and sex.
I'm very comfortable with it. I did include my own fantasy in the book.
Any clues which one? It is just over 50 years since Nancy Friday published her book, her groundbreaking book, My Secret Garden, full of women's sexual fantasies. This, Want, is your selection, equally groundbreaking, from women who have written to you from all over the world.
We have such a wide range of letters and all different kinds of fantasies from different women and cultures and sexual preferences and diverse backgrounds. Why don't you start by telling me how you feel when you think about having sex?
Your role as Jean Milburn in Sex Education was very much that, a role. You're not a psychologist, but you are, of course, an advocate for women, a supporter of LGBTQ+ rights. I wondered how you trod the line between curation of the book and analysing the fantasies.
I find it hard to read them and not think, who are they? What's going on in their lives? If they haven't revealed very much, what's behind? What's the psychology behind these particular fantasies, proclivities? As you say, I'm not an expert, and I have left that to other people, and in the process of communicating around the book and the events that we'll be holding and the discourse that will end up happening, I have no doubt there will be conversations about psychology and motivation and trauma. But I think what I was most interested in was the joy and the enjoyment that the women had clearly in writing, how much it opened them up to understanding themselves more, it seemed. I mean, ultimately, this is not my book. This is the book of every woman who contributed. And yes, I curated, and yes, I wrote the introduction and introductions to each chapter. But it very much feels like the voices of women who dared to write in and be heard.
And there is still, for many people, a shame or a taboo about talking about sex and talking about your sexual fantasies. You seem fairly comfortable about sexuality and sex. Is that right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I am. I'm very comfortable with it. I mean, it's not something that I talk about, outside of this book. I don't talk about it all the time.
Don't spend your time going out for dinner and telling people your sexual fantasies.
I don't. And I did, as I say, I did include my own fantasy in the book. That was requested by the publishers.
How did you feel about that?
And I was fine. It made sense to me. It made perfect sense that I would do that. What I was surprised by was how long I put it off and how much I struggled to actually get it down on the page. And it wasn't so much about making it perfect or interesting to read. It was certain words, the intimacy of it suddenly, describing the imagery that's been in my head for a while, and the action of doing that was so, added a level of intimacy that I wouldn't have expected, and I wouldn't have expected myself to be so shy around it and so nervous around it. But you touched on taboo, and I mean that is one of the reasons why I was curious about launching this book and continuing the conversation that Nancy Friday started, and that is, sex and sexual fantasy is still very much taboo, even though we have, shows like Sex Education and Euphoria and 50 Shades of Grey, and there are many erotic films that are actually at Venice Film Festival right now. And so it is, and I must, talk about the multi-billion-dollar porn industry. It's in our faces, on our screens, on our phones all the time. And yet, talking about what goes on inside our minds makes people really uncomfortable.
I wonder whether you came to any conclusions about how our attitudes to sex and women and sex have changed in the 50 odd years since Nancy Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that surprised me was that there is still so much shame, that women still struggle to talk about it, struggle to share, even, in the Western world where we have access to it all the time. Obviously still there are many countries and cultures where illegality, around same-sex partnership is real and, punishable by death. And there are cultures where, anything outside of the heteronormative sexual relationship is just, taboo beyond what we experience. But the fact that in the West, women still struggle and share in this book about how much they struggle to think about it, to talk about it, was quite an eye-opener, because it was evident to me in Nancy Friday's book, and I would have thought there would be less of it today.
Any sense of why? Any understanding of why there isn't?
Well, I think, I think it's because it is still taboo, because we don't talk about it. It's not pleasure. Pleasure, which is part of what we're talking about, is not necessarily taught in schools. It's not part of sex education. So much of sex education is about, what you shouldn't do, and it's quite rudimentary and technical.
I should say, just for people watching and listening, I should say that some of what I want to refer to now is quite detailed and might offend people. But in Nancy Friday's book, there are explicit chapters about fantasies of non-consensual and illegal sex. For example, in a chapter about rape fantasies. I think you received some of those kind of submissions too, and although your book isn't so explicit, it does venture in that direction. You have a chapter called The Captive. What was your thought process when deciding what to include in that area?
We definitely talked about it, and we made it very clear that we weren't going to accept letters that bordered on illegality or bestiality or incest, and I think that was absolutely the right call. However, there are some in the captive section and a few other letters that border on dangerous topics, and it almost felt disingenuous for us not to include them.
Because they are fantasies that women have.
Because they are fantasies that women have. And that doesn't necessarily mean that those fantasies are something that a woman actually wants to happen. Part of the point of them and processing them in the confines of a woman's mind is working that stuff out. And also, we have to remember that all fantasy, we are the director, even though it may describe actions that are that appear to be non-consensual, they are consensual by the fact that they are being made up in the minds of the woman who is fantasizing about them.
She's in charge.
She's in charge. She is the director and can decide with whom, when, where, how much, how often, when to stop, when to continue. So it feels like an empowering admission and revelation rather than something that is, that is under somebody else's control.
I found it fascinating that there's, and I guess quite sad as well, there's quite a lot about body image and, it plays quite a big part in people's fantasies. Some people aren't able to include themselves in their fantasy. One woman has a secret dream about being touched because no one likes to touch her.
What I'm finding in hearing from people who are reading the book is that by reading other women talk about the degree of shame that they feel, and also the details of the kinds of sexual fantasies that they have, that they feel less alone.
One woman says, one short entry says, my fantasy is to have a man love me for who I am and not to see me as a living sex toy. And I think, I wonder whether you would read an extract. I think it's page 15 for us.
Yeah. I found it so difficult to understand what truly my own fantasies are. So much of what is played out in porn is geared towards men, and so many expectations set on us as women that I have a very difficult time navigating what really turns me on versus how I feel I should perform. I guess my number one fantasy is to be made to feel like I am utterly desired. I want to be completely ravished, for my partner to explore my body like it's a drug for them, to make me feel as if just my naked presence ignites them. Not because it's just another naked body, but because it's me and my body. Feeling so unique and hearing it from another person makes me feel desirable for exactly who I am, all insecurities aside. And the more desirable I feel I am to my bed partner, the more aroused I am.
There's something about the being desirable.
Being desirable, being seen, being, wanted desperately. There's a chapter called Worshipped, and there's a lot of letters from women talking about the desire, the fantasy of having someone, man, woman, other, just worshipping at their feet, thinking that they are how they are, exactly as they are, is the most beautiful, the most radiant, the most sexy, the most ravishing. I think that's interesting.
And you mentioned porn earlier, and you pick it up through the book, the kind of influence of that. I wonder how you view it. Has porn changed our sex lives and perception of sex, particularly amongst younger people?
Well, I think the book reflects on that. I think the book would probably be quite a good read for youth of today, because there are so many different versions of how sex can be that is outside what one might see handed to them by the porn industry. There's a lot of tenderness and, women really wanting to be seen for themselves and who they are and be cared for. I'm finding that as we're having these conversations and women are feeling more empowered to talk out loud about, if they choose to, talk out loud about what it is that they want under the covers, it kind of spreads into their real lives, just starting to think about what it is that they actually want. What do you want? What do you want from your partner? What do you want from your relationship? What do you want from your job? What do you want from your life? And feeling courageous enough through engaging in those types of conversations to start asking for it. That is I feel one of the reasons why I was interested in doing this, as I said, I'm not a sex therapist. This is a moment in time where I'm having this conversation around this book. As much as anything, it's about getting to a point where we feel comfortable living our lives on our own terms.
And I suppose one of the things I'd like to talk to you obviously about your career as well, but I was interested that in the book, many of the fantasies are from older women. They have insight, they appreciate their emotional maturity. So the aging process, I'm glad to hear it, as I'm very much aging, does have its benefits. But I know it's also quite brutal. I know from my limited experience of seeing myself on screen over the years, it's horrendous. And as an actor in the public eye, I wonder how you deal with it and how you approach aging while looking almost more beautiful than you did in the X-Files many, many years ago. Got to be said.
How do I approach aging? I mean, I've certainly gone through periods where it's, it struck me quite harshly that I too am aging, and almost feel like one needs to go through a mourning of, mourning youth at various stages. And
is that tears? How's the mourning going? What is the mourning?
Just really deep feelings, especially as, offspring, starting relationships, starting that stage of the journey, remembering what it was like to first fall in love, all of that, it brings up a lot of feelings and emotions, and it's very moving and slightly melancholic, and so I mean, more than anything, that feels like how I'm dealing with it is just, processing the feelings around it. But, being on camera, there are certainly times where I see, I don't, most of the time watch dailies or see the process of it, but as, seeing the final product and thinking, oh my God, is that really what I look like? And, going through some feelings around that, but then also realizing that that's, going to be the youngest that I look like from here on out, so I better, embrace it.
Very wise, and it doesn't look like you're going down the route of there's such a sort of push in Hollywood, it seems, to sort of be endlessly plasticized, and I'm not complaining about that, but if it works for people, but...
Yeah. Haven't reached for that yet, but at some point, who knows?
You'll never need it. Don't be ridiculous. You mentioned your offspring. I have to ask, because my children get very embarrassed by things I do. If your mum plays a sex therapist, has a book about sexual fantasies, and a drinks brand called G-Spot, are you the coolest mum in the world, or quite embarrassing to them?
I don't know. I have had that conversation with my kids. I've got teenagers and an almost 30-something. And during sex education, I did have a very frank conversation with them. They hadn't seen the show at the time, and I did want to talk to them about the degree to which it was impacting on their personal lives, and both apologise, but also to talk about how important it was that show was out there, and that I felt very proud of it. And they got it. They got what I was saying.
And people will remember you, of course, as Margaret Thatcher in The Crown, amongst many other amazing roles. Did you, when you were thinking about inhabiting her character, or indeed any of the women you've played, how much are you thinking about them as a woman? And I wonder whether you were even thinking about what Margaret Thatcher's sexual fantasies might have been.
I did not think about Margaret Thatcher's sexual fantasies.
Maybe that's best. She was obviously had died many years before you took up that role. Emily Maitlis is a colleague of mine. I worked with her at Newsnight. You played her for Scoop, and that must be very different to play a living character.
Yeah, very different. Much more daunting, and particularly somebody that I respect and admire, and is, out and about in my relative social circle.
She says she met you in 2001. She says she dined with you, danced with you, you brought her drinks.
So more daunting even than Margaret Thatcher was playing Emily Maitlis.
She can be quite daunting, Emily, while also being absolutely fabulous. Yeah. And she's, in fact, got her own drama coming out that she's exec produced about that same interview. Do you think there's room for such close together, two dramas about the same interview with Prince Andrew?
I don't know. It's interesting, because the one that we did was Sam McAllister's take.
Who's a producer?
On what happened, the producer of the, and I'm very interested to see it, and hopefully there is room. There's obviously room. for both versions.
Now often in Britain we claim you as ours, but you're not, because you are actually American, of course, but you've lived here for a long time, and you seem to be able to switch accents. Where do you see yourself? Where do you see as home?
Oh, I definitely see the UK as home. I think I've alighted on something that makes sense to me, which is that, because if I'm asked if I want to give up my American passport, that doesn't feel right. And so it feels like perhaps my cells are American, but that my soul is British. That seems to answer it quite well. That makes the most sense. But it's weird because I can, depending on where I am, if there's an American sitting on my right-hand side, before long, if I'm not paying attention, talking to the Brit on my left, I'll start to, and I don't pay too much attention to it unless it feels like it's just going to be weird, and then I'll probably try and decidedly choose one or the other because, So I don't know. It's an ongoing topic of interviews.
And I think you this autumn you're about to start filming in Belfast, a Channel 4 drama.
Yeah.
How's your Belfast accent?
It's not bad, actually. Yeah, I did a film in Northern Ireland many, many years ago, and seems to do all right. I'll have a top up before we start.
Are there particular words? My husband always says, he's from the northeast, to do northeast right, you have to say termosalata. Actually, I can't do it. But there's certain words that work. For Wales, it's aluminium saucepans. I can't do that one either because I'm terrible at accents.
Aluminium saucepans?
Welsh.
Welsh.
Aluminium saucepans. I don't know whether you have a special Northern Ireland word that
I don't have a phrase or a word, no. Well, there was one that I did use that helped to get into it. I'm not gonna, yeah.
Oh.
There's time for that.
Okay, and because also you've also been filming a Western, an intense 3 months this summer in Calgary.
I have, yeah.
Tell us about that. What is it, and how's your horse riding?
So that is a Netflix Western, takes place in the 1800s, middle of the 1800s, called Abandons, that we're in the middle of shooting in Calgary, Canada. And horseback riding is all right. I rode a little bit when I was in my 30s, and seem to remember.
Buy a horse?
Huh?
Did you buy a horse back then?
I did. I mean, it was a very inexpensive horse, and I found out why it was so inexpensive because I thought it was 7 years old and it was 20.
And therefore very easy to ride, maybe, or maybe not.
Yeah, although he did spook and throw me at one point, and I landed on my back. But that's another story. But yes, yeah, horse riding is all right. It's a lot of fun, actually. I'm enjoying it. It's a fantastic project.
And is this a female-empowered sort of women,
it
putting
is.
women at the heart of the Western kind of thing?
Me and Lena Headey dueling. She was in Game of Thrones, and dueling matriarchs. I own the town. I'm a silver baron, and it's my town. And
how does that feel? I like the sound of that.
I say that a lot as I'm walking down the middle of the town. I say, this is my town.
Do you have a favourite character you've played? Does it work like that as an actor? Do you have people that you look back on and love?
I can only speak for myself. But I'm probably always going to say Blanche Dubois in Streetcar Named Desire, probably.
Why?
Always say that. It was a role I wanted to play since I was in high school, and finally did it 30 years later. And probably one of the most challenging to mount and also to play consistently. We did it here and in New York.
They told me to take a street called named Desire and then transfer to one called Cemeteries and ride it 6 blocks and get off at Elysian Fields. That's where you are now.
She slowly goes mad and is taken off to an insane asylum. And so, one sees that as an audience. You see that disintegration happen.
I said I was sorry 3 times. I'll take hot baths for my nerves.
And so it was, the most taxing and emotionally wrecking.
For viewers of TV, obviously, there'll be many who'll be saying, but it's Scully.
The answers are there. You just have to know where to look.
Or it's Stella in The Fall.
Yeah.
But for you personally, it's that.
Yeah.
It's that role. just want to go back to your book, Want.
Yes, please.
The fantasies are anonymous.
Yes.
The only identification for each one are things like nationality, sexual orientation, relationship status, money, earnings. And as you said, one of the fantasies is yours, and I have to ask, I'm so sorry, because I imagine many people reading the book will wonder, any clues which one?
Yeah, well, I thought actually today I might let you know which one it was, because I thought it's BBC, and no. There's no way.
Well,
no, I mean, what's great is that they're anonymous. I don't think we would have gotten the honesty and frankness and breadth of what we got had it not been anonymous. And yeah, and so mine will stay anonymous.
Fantastic. Well, I'll enjoy reading it, as will many people, I'm sure. And thank you so much for talking to us, Gillian Anderson.
Thank you for having me.